Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was watching Michael Stone speak in Montreal, and he was saying something really interesting at the end. He was saying, we don't need to state our demands right now because we actually don't know how big this is. Mm-hmm. And what I thought was really interesting in Israel was that it started as a movement for social housing and equitable housing and all that kind of stuff, which actually goes across the board to Jews, Arabs, secular, non-secular, young people, single mothers, families, Orthodox Jews, the whole gamut. But what was really interesting about what happened was the movement became much more intelligent really, really quickly. It learned really quickly how to include diversity and to create a movement that could actually hold the paradoxes of people who are usually on different sides of the right and left, right and wrong, Arab, Jewish, etc. And holding those paradoxes and saying, but there's still something at the center of all this that we can all believe in was absolutely brilliant. And I actually think that these movements are showing us a new form of intelligence around holding complexity and paradox and actually learning collectively very, very quickly. And that's actually the work that we do.
Just kind of coming back to your experience in Jerusalem and what you've seen, like these paradoxes and these I guess opposites, and you describe Jerusalem as living in a conflict zone in a region of the world fractured by war, divisions, and the paradoxes of religion, mysticism, security, and territory. So how do you keep yourself whole in this kind of environment, and how do you stay connected, nourished, and integrated?
Well, I'd say first of all, it's really hard.
Yeah.
I find it really hard because all my reference points changed, both within me and around me. And so there was actually a period of time where I wasn't just ungrounded, but I was uncentered. And for me, that's also a time of transformation. If all of that is happening at once, it's like something's seriously breaking open, and there are new reference points waiting for me to find them. So the first thing in that was that I had actually a few people who understood the magnitude of the change I was going through. And it was actually simply to be in a relationship with the chaos and finding anchor points to at least know that the chaos was temporary, etc. So that's one thing. One is having relationships with people who understood not who I was so much, but what was real for me, and also maybe who I might be becoming, and being really open to that. So that's one thing. The other staying whole, I think, has been knowing that my yoga practice looked a certain way in North America, and I wanted to really find those anchor points, and they weren't available to me in the same way. And so I was looking for yoga studios, I was looking for teachers, meditation, sangha, just anything that could offer me that kind of container. And I realized that even though there was a lot of that, they weren't resonating with me for some reason, or I wasn't finding them, and I needed to find those reference points within myself. And that was really, it's sort of obvious in some senses, but I was looking for the comfort and the safety of being with others, and simply it wasn't happening, and I had to reevaluate what it meant in my own self, what yoga was for me. And I moved to Jerusalem because I fell in love with someone, not because I had a big dream of going to the whole land or because I had work, but because I was in a relationship. And actually, that was my yoga practice. It was practicing love with all of this kind of breaking open in me and all the chaos around me, and actually staying on course by being in a relationship and working through things with another rather than only within myself. And that was really hard. As a North American young woman who grew up always working, taking care of myself, I speak French, I speak English, I know my way around. None of that was available, and I had to really actually let go of many of the expectations I had of myself as a so-called independent woman, and open up to actually relationship in a really, really different way. And then the last thing has been actually about really listening to my body. Jerusalem in Israel, for me, has an energy and a density that is really, really different than Canada, for example, and other places I've lived and traveled. And it was giving me a lot of information in my body about when to engage and when not to, when to come into my own kind of energy field, and when to engage with others. And that's been I've been learning so much about energy and about energetic fields and that kind of stuff, because that's, reading Hebrew and Arabic, that's not my big forte, but reading energy has now become much more my realm. And that's been really, really interesting. And the other part of that is actually really opening up and understanding that I can be connected to others through distance without needing to be physically present. And I'm a very physical person. I'm experiential. My ways of interacting are through, I'm an extrovert as well. So people's reactions and feedback really give me context. And I've been learning how to not need that so much, and actually understanding that I'm connected to many people or places or projects, and I don't need to be there in person. There are other ways of being in a sophisticated and intimate relationship without being physically present. And that's been really, really interesting. And the last was, I've been learning a lot about this practice of geomancy. Okay. And geomancy is this incredible practice of, it's almost like an earth acupuncture. Okay. And it works with the energetic meridians of the earth, just like Chinese medicine works with the meridians in the body. And understanding that I'm in a place, Jerusalem, that has a lot of acupuncture points in both the earth energy lines, but also with people. And understanding that this is actually a practice I'm really interested in, because somehow intuitively I'm understanding how, or wanting to understand more how that works. And so a lot of the work that we're doing in the world is actually about opening up energy lines between people and place in very conscious ways, so that actually one of our big partners is the earth. And that she's got a lot of intelligence for us, and we have a lot to give her. And so in this time of maybe conscious evolution right now, that if we're not doing it with all the intelligence available to us, including the earth, we're actually missing the point. So being in that part of the world has actually taught me a lot about that, and being in a place where the mystic traditions of Sufism and the Kabbalah and Christian mysticism, that there's a lot around oneness. That the paradox is it's a place that's really divided, literally walls, literally territories, literally war and division, and yet underneath all of that is this, maybe it's a geomantic thing, underneath all of that are these sources of intelligence or energy that are waiting to be accessed, because it's oneness. It's the connection to this, the source that doesn't change. But we've created all the static above it. And so what I've been finding really interesting there is that my practice isn't to be involved in the so-called politics, which I thought I would be, and my activism isn't always the activism going out on the street. Sometimes it's very consciously to not do that. And to hold an energetic field, to be very, very conscious of my own body, my own whatever I'm picking up, but then connecting that with others in a really conscious way, whether it's in the same place or it's people in other regions. So I've been really fascinated by the combination of all these things.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Another one of your projects is the Living Wholeness Institute, which I find fascinating, given what you're talking about here with the fragmentation and the oneness. So tell me a little bit about the Living Wholeness Institute and what you do with that, and how it connects to everything else that you're doing.
So the Living Wholeness Institute has come out of the work that I've been doing with Maria Scordialis and Sarah Whiteley, who are friends in Greece, who I've known through the Brooklyn Exchange, which is an exchange of learning centers and people who are really pioneering kind of what we were talking about before. How do you live with the resources that are actually available to you from your own culture, from your place, from people, and create new institutions and new forms of living, new kinds of community that are really aligned with culture, with values, with place, etc. So Maria and Sarah live in Greece, and they own they guardian a 24-acre olive farm. And so a lot of the genesis of Living Wholeness has actually come from the practices that have emerged from working and living as a living system, not studying it, but being it, and realizing that so much of what's important and what's available to us is actually in the ecology, and how nature works, and how ecosystems and ecologies actually learn and grow and evolve. And so the Living Wholeness Institute is a number of different things. We're actually calling it a university now. Okay. Because it's actually learning. It's learning with life. And so the projects are everything from the Finance Innovation Lab, which is a really out there project, which is working with people who want to innovate and change things. But underneath that are the people who are calling those projects and who are deeply, deeply committed to living their wholeness by hosting others through these projects into a kind of a wholeness. And so I would say that well, in the Sufi tradition, there's the story of the carpet sellers, and the carpet seller. If you walk into the carpet shop and you want to buy a carpet, you can buy it from the carpet seller. So, but if you go in and you ask some questions and you say, well, how does this work and what is the pattern? Well, the carpet seller will tell you more about the pattern that lies underneath it. And all the patterns are about wholeness. They're about oneness with the universe and with one's heart and with the divine and everything. And then if the carpet seller recognizes the student and says, this is someone who's deeply inquiring, they're a seeker, they'll invite them into the back room for tea and they'll start to talk. And then they'll become a student and a teacher. And then in the last iteration, the student becomes, the Sufi becomes a teacher and then goes to the front room and sells carpets. So actually, that's how the Living Wholeness University works. The front room is the Finance Innovation Lab. And the second room is, well, how do we do this? What are the practices? So we create these learning opportunities and workshops and stuff. The third room is when we really notice that there are people who are so ready to go deeply into living these patterns. And we invite them into immersion learning, which is actually at Akladitz, and these are deep immersive experiences with others from around the world to go into those questions and those practices individually and together, collectively. And then the fourth room is actually just living the practice, and then hosting others into these kinds of practices. And the practices are depth and breadth, but they're also with the visible and the invisible world. So I was talking about these sort of invisible intelligences, but also our visible ones. And then there's also the individual and the collective. So really being able to navigate one's own self with others and the collective unconscious.
What I see there too is this relationship. It seems to be like relationship driven. It's like to use the Sufi story, it's like, can you develop that relationship to ask questions and to take that inquiry, and that seems to be the thread going through all of your work, like through the friendships that you have. That's the work's driven by friendship, by your relationship that brought you to Israel, and just your relationships with like systems and the earth and everything. So that's really, really fascinating. So
I would say, just really quickly, I would say too that maybe it's like relationships is the new currency. Like the economy isn't so much, what money and what do we value and how do we exchange things, but it's actually, a currency of the heart or relationships, and that's actually where I feel I'm wealthiest now. I make a lot of money, but I'm definitely wealthy. The kinds of relationships that I have are so meaningful to me, and even the hard ones, I'm learning so much from them that for me is it's a hard currency. It's a hard and a soft currency. So maybe that's part of the new economy.
I love that. That is awesome. I love the idea of relationships being the new economy. And to give up on credit and money, and which isn't really, it's not tangible anyways, right? It's not really that real. So this is coming to a close, Vanessa. So yeah, so I love the idea of ending on the relationship note. I think it's a perfect ending place, and I'm just going to click stop.